We need to introduce our correspondent from the bubble. Now that I'm out of the bubble, we need someone inside the bubble. So let's bring in our good friend, a friend of the pod, Miami Heat sharpshooter, Duncan Robinson. Duncan, what's up, man?
Hey, appreciate you guys having me. It's an honor to be your correspondent. You know, I've been a big fan of the pod for a while, and then obviously the recent production has been exciting. So, like I said, happy to be a part of it.
Well, we're excited to get your perspective on things as you guys move through the playoffs. Before we get to that, though, take me through your little altercation with Chris Paul, also a friend, that led to Jimmy Butler basically deciding to truck him.
Yeah. It's funny because in the moment, I really didn't think much of it. I really thought that it was just kind of a basketball play. And then when I looked back at it afterwards, I could see how the optics of it came across as they did. For one, he had multiple teammates wide open that he could have just thrown the ball to, and he just elected to throw it off of me. And then also the camera angles like perfectly caught him kind of jawing at me, so it definitely looked like there was some back and forth. But really, it didn't really feel like anything out of the normal. But then, of course, Jimmy just kind of took matters into his own hands, which I was appreciative of. And then also, obviously, the post-game comments he had, you know, in my defense, were also I was appreciative of.
What was Chris saying to you?
Basically, like Andre set a flare screen. He switched out to me, and I should have shot it. He kind of like had one of those aggressive closeouts, so I didn't. And then he poked it out. And he immediately started barking at the ref. He's like, "Oh, that's off him. That's off him." And it just like blatantly wasn't. So I said to him, I was like, just stop. But I didn't mean it like in a disrespectful way. And then he kind of snapped at me. He's like, "Stop." He's like, "What are you talking about? Stop." And then this is where it kind of went someplace it shouldn't. And I didn't even mean it to go there, but I was like, I just said, "You're lucky I didn't just shoot it." And then he kind of said, it was weird, like, because he almost kind of complimented me. He was like, "Yeah, you can shoot it, but like I ain't going," or something like that. And then he just was kind of going, and but it didn't go to like a totally like dark place. It was more so just kind of like back and forth banter, I would say.
Tommy, Duncan has told similar stories on previous podcasts to us, and I feel like things that come out of his mouth, he doesn't intend for things to go to a place, and yet again and again we see things go to that place with him.
The low-key instigator.
I think we're realizing Duncan is a shit talker.
I'll say this in my defense. I think intention is important, and I think that I'll come back to that, and that I really don't intend for it to be like demeaning or anything like that. But I do also understand, especially with the flow of the game and how everything was going, how it could have like agitated or kind of instigated a reaction from him. So I'm not sitting here. I'm not naive to the fact that like I'm just like totally innocent in this. But I don't think it was like anything outlandish.
But JJ, let me ask you this, because your first couple years in the league, once you started playing, you were in a similar position where if you start lighting some team up like Duncan has done throughout this entire season, the other team is going to get mad at you as the cocky shooter, the guy that is just hit 5 threes in a row. How do you sort of be you and sort of show emotion without causing these problems?
Well, that's what my learning experience at Duke was for. By the time I got to the NBA, I knew just to sort of keep my mouth shut. That was basically it. I'm going to be honest with you.
Duncan, I have a shooter question for you, because we've talked about this with the other guys. What was your learning curve with the depth perception in terms of shooting with no fans?
Let me say one thing to JJ's point first. I didn't have the luxury of being a National Player of the Year candidate in college, so I wasn't a focal point. In
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I wasn't a National Player of the Year candidate. I was a 2-time National Player of the Year winner. I just want to be clear there.
Clarified.
I'm thankful that you made that clarification. I knew you had one. I didn't know you had two. My apologies for me to come on your podcast and
this guy says he's a fan. He says he's a fan. Doesn't even know
as our correspondent.
Yeah. That's fair. But yeah, so I guess the learning experience that you went through in college, I think I am now learning, because I will say, like, I also have realized at times that it's sometimes better and more beneficial to me to just like maintain completely being under the radar, and that I get picked on maybe a little bit less on defense or whatever. I'm just not as much. I can just kind of like go through the motions without being as much of a priority. It's something that I've kind of learned this year. But to your original question, the depth perception, I don't really think has made that much of a difference. The setup is definitely, I think, maybe beneficial to some people, and that maybe guys that are kind of impacted by crowds or what have you. But for me, it's pretty normal, just because I've kind of said this a little bit in the media, but like I played in the G League as recent as last year, and a lot of G League gyms are set up similar to this, particularly the G League Showcase, which is basically identical. It's just like executives on the sides, and then the backdrop is just blank like it is here. So it's kind of been not as much of a transition for me in that regard.
We're going to do our mailbag question of the week. Duncan, you're going to stick around for that. I just want to wish you a deep playoff run, and just know that if you guys bow out early, we're going to have to find a new correspondent. So there's a little bit of pressure on you to stick around for a few weeks. All right.
That's intimidating stuff right there. I'll see what I can do.
This is the important thing. All right.
All right. Should we do this question?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Tony Dye from Griffith, Indiana wrote in, if there was one sports event outcome you could change, what would it be? And it's a pretty broad question. His example, which I honestly might have picked if he hadn't said it, was the Bears drafting Mitch Trubisky in the same draft as Mahomes and Deshaun Watson.
Well, just based on that example alone, you obviously think to the Portland Trailblazers not drafting Sam Bowie, or not drafting Michael Jordan, drafting Sam Bowie instead. But I'm going to go something a little more personal to me, and that would be the 1999 national championship game, Duke versus UConn. Duke had one of the all-time best college teams, and UConn had Khalid El-Amin and Richard Hamilton, really strong team. They upset Duke in the championship. So I would change the ending to that game with a Duke win.
Growing up in New England, I would probably say, I think it was 2008, David Tyree catch on his helmet. That was a tough one for me. I think I cried all night or whatever. I don't know how old I was, but I don't think I went to school the next day. I was so broken up about it.
So were you a huge Pats fan?
Yeah. Die hard.
Was the younger Duncan a masshole?
I don't think I grew up outside of Boston enough where I don't think I was influenced by that. But maybe some tendencies, yeah.
Tommy, what about you? What's the one sporting event you would change?
2003, Steve Bartman, Game 6, 8th inning. I don't know what specific part of it I would change. I think the Cubs left in Mark Pryor. They left him in to try to pitch the 8th, and he ended up getting lit up. So that's probably the specific thing. But it's honestly I just wish fucking Steve Bartman wasn't at the game.
That's fair. Before we let you go, Duncan, give us a little bit of perspective on playing with D. Wade and what that was like last year.
Just an incredible experience. Probably the thing that stuck out the most to me was, I was an undrafted rookie on a two-way contract, and 16-year vet, 3-time NBA champ. His accolades go on, and he still took the time to connect with me, reach out to me, lend me advice on how to make it, how to treat your body, all sorts of different things, X's and O's. And that's just something I'll never forget, regardless of how my career turns out, to know that I've had that experience with him, and also just in his final year to be humble enough to pay it forward to a younger guy who really at that point had no standing whatsoever. Who knew if I was even going to be with the Heat for another week or month or whatever. But but yeah, he's definitely that's something in my career that I'll never forget.
I love that. And I've always been a D-Wade fan. After hearing stories like that and after talking to him for this episode, I'm an even bigger fan. The guy's an all-time great on and off the court. Thank you, Duncan Robinson. We'll hear from you soon. You're the best correspondent yet.
Appreciate that.